Horror has become known for its subgenres, found footage, body horror, paranormal, but I think there's one subgenre that has stood at the front and crafted some of the most iconic kills, characters, and legacies as a whole. This is about slasher films. Being one of the most recognizable and loved categories, slasher flicks have become the face of horror for about 50 years now, showing themselves to be a true integral piece of media. But they were not the first to introduce this type of concept. Now, the base level definition that seems to be agreed upon is that a slasher flick is an at first unknown or masked human-based killer who is hunting down a group of victims. And of course, this can get way more specific and detailed, as we'll get into, of course, with our likes of Final Girls and such. But we have to start a conversation with nowhere else but Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 film Psycho, which that little freak claimed was a comedy. In Psycho, we follow Secretary Marion, who's on the run after stealing money from her boss. So when she's tired from traveling, she opts to stay at the backroad, vaguely rundown Bates Motel, where she then meets one of the forever icons of horror, Norman Bates. A young man with a love of taxidermy and a far too close relationship with his mother, which I think sums up some of you watching this right now. Psycho gave us one of the most arguably unforgettable scenes in a movie, and it put a big focus on editing and scoring with this shower scene. There are so many people I know who have never seen Psycho, but if you start making the noise and doing this, everyone knows what you're referencing. It just shows how integral scoring actually becomes into slashers, like we'll see with Halloween and Friday the 13th. That sound, everyone knows what that sound is. It also starts to introduce perversity into film, along with the film that came out at the same time in 1960, Peeping Tom. And I think perversity is, again, an integral piece of a slasher film, and also a reason people demonize it. And since we're talking predecessors and perversity, there's nowhere else to go but the Italian subgenre of film, giallos. Giallos are a perfect blend of overt violence and excessive sexuality. One of the cornerstones of them is the fact that we get to see the POV of our unknown killer, creating a new sense of dread. We are seeing through the eyes of the killer. We are seeing the absolute brutality of the attack on the individual, and this is something that totally translated into American slasher films. As well, giallos are the child of the love of mystery crime novels in Italy, so we're following most storylines in a stylized crime investigation, typically with detectives involved along the way, which shows itself in a hell of a lot of slashers. Although in American slashers, it has a bigger focus on the idiocracy and incompetence of the police department, like we'll see in Scream, which gave us the second revival of neo-slashers, as we will get into later. But America said, yes, cops, but they're dumb, because they are. The commonly recognized first giallo film is Mario Bava's film, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, which influenced the first slasher film to the point that John Saxon, who starred in it, would also make his appearance as a detective in the first American slasher, well, it's Canadian, but the first North American slasher, 1974 Black Christmas, and he also would go on to play Nancy's dad in A Nightmare on Elm Street. So John Saxon is kind of an unsung slasher queen. In 1974, North America would get its first taste of the bridge from giallo to slasher with Bob Clark's film, Black Christmas, in which you follow a sorority house who's gearing up for the holiday break and begin receiving threatening and perverse phone calls from a stranger who begins killing them off one by one within the home. Black Christmas is a movie that just fills you with dread and anxiety and leaves you with not a single ounce of feeling good, as it has no final girl and no killer reveal, which I think is what makes the film. This is such a pivotal point of horror media. Black Christmas is so good and did so much for the genre. It also plays onto this already existing urban legend that people were sharing around the time and very fearful about, usually referred to as the man upstairs or the babysitter, which I'm sure you've heard this before. It's that a girl is at home babysitting and she starts to get weird, creepy phone calls, and she starts to realize the guy knows too much about her and the kid and the house and everything. She calls the cops. They begin tracing the call, and they tell her the call is coming from within the house, which is also where that saying comes from. And, she runs out. Different stories say different things. She gets away from him, he gets caught, he kills her, yada, yada, yada. But this actually also went on to inspire arguably the greatest slasher film ever made, the Cadillac of horror, John Carpenter's Halloween. Halloween stands the test of time for probably all of time, and is the catalyst of creation and inspiration for the genre as a whole. On a dark Halloween night, 6-year-old Michael Myers murders his sister Judith in their home. And 15 years later, he would escape his incarceration during a psych prison transfer, returning home to Haddonfield, just in time for Halloween, and killing those in his wake after picking up a cheap Captain Kirk mask and terrorizing everyone. The character building in Halloween is really effective. Like, there's no final girl like Laurie. She's smart, she's resourceful. We become so entirely invested in her, trying to scream, hoping she does not end up in the same fate as her friends, because we've spent this time building and resonating with her. Her fate is our fate. And along with her, Michael, the building of Michael, it's like he is just a total boogeyman in the sense. We're greeted with the film showing us his backstory and escape, so we have some sense of knowledge around him, but he's still just totally unknown. We don't know his motivations, only that he kills with no remorse or reason, other than those being in his way. And the way they film this movie is just so damn good, even now. Like, the opening shot of us sitting in the POV of 6-year-old Michael Myers, which we would have no clue without the, really big height difference, but you're watching this and you're not going to jump to the thought of, oh, this is familial murder by an infant, essentially, on camera. The reveal works. Just the opening shot of Halloween is so amazing with the scoring behind it. Like, the way scoring can transform a scene in horror is so insane, because there is this, like, if you think about having that sound, you picture the whole film in a way. It's, like, so transformative. The filming of Halloween is visually interesting, using smooth, fluid shots of movement throughout the entire film, with really natural POV shifts. Everything is in this extremely wide shot, and it makes suburbia atmospheric and unclean. The monster's in your own backyard, and he could be behind any fence, bush, wall. Any corner of the shot, you're almost searching for Michael in it. Halloween stands as, in my humble opinion, a 5 out of 5 horror movie. This is the cleanest execution of how to do a slasher movie, and he kind of crafted slasher flicks with this. I do want to mention a sometimes left out of the conversation film from 2 years before called Alice, Sweet Alice. I mention it because 1, it's an absolutely amazing film, but 2, it does surround the situation of a female killer, and slashers are inherently viewed as a very misogynistic subgenre. Alice, Sweet Alice revolves around 2 sisters in the Catholic Church, where the one, Karen, is doted on as the perfect child, and Alice is held to an unreasonably high standard, which leads to her acting out for attention. Ultimately, a young girl is killed at her first communion by a maniac in a yellow raincoat and a doll mask. And it is so creepy. I really love the design they went with for Alice, Sweet Alice, and I'm not going to spoil this film because I know a lot of people haven't seen this, but I will say right now, I'm going to be spoiling films in this movie. I'm going to be spoiling movies in this video, so if you don't want, like, slashers from 30 years ago spoiled, don't watch this. But it does make us believe Alice is the killer. We see her run her sister really creepily into an abandoned house, and, like, Alice is a creepy little girl. And I really do beg you to watch this movie. It is a beyond phenomenal early slasher. It is following all the tropes and establishing them before they were established to follow. And with that as well, the excessive Catholicism imagery, that is just up my alley. And the killing of a girl on her first communion and all the artsy-fartsy ways you could really break down this movie. I cannot recommend Alice, Sweet Alice enough. But back to slashics. I think the perfect bridge point between the over-decadence of Psycho and the clean execution of John Carpenter's Halloween would be Daddy's favorite, the 1974 film, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the most important movies ever made, and you can fight me about it. I will die on this hill. Without the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there'd be a giant gap within horror, and I even think there'd be a gap within film as a whole. We follow a group of friends on a road trip to check on 2 of their grandfather's body, after reports of bodies were being dug up and messed with are being spread around Texas. Soon enough, they fall into danger with a cannibalistic family after picking up one of the hitchhikers and dumping him on the back road after he let his freak flag fly, and soon enough, they are targeted by his cannibalistic family, the Sawyers. We are introduced to one of the most iconic faces, Leatherface, or as I call him, Bubba, because we are family. This film has an iconic opening sequence of a narrator explaining to us that this is based on true events. It's very true crime documentary style, and that the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is one of the most bizarre crimes in the annal of American history. All while we're met with shots of decaying bodies, lit by camera flashes, and hostile sounds of the scoring. Immediately, we're set into a raw, uncomfortable, and violent existence within rural Texas before we even get the establishing shot of the film. Where I just praised Halloween for its clean, fluid shots, I praise Texas Massacre the exact same for the opposite execution. There are these really shaky, at times, handy cam footage of when we're walking and we're with the group, we're in the van and we're rocking with the van, and it gives this very real sense of what we are a part of now by watching Texas Chainsaw. And this is absolutely on purpose, because in the opposite realm, we have these shots where the camera is so low to the ground, pointed up. It's like we're a phantom following everybody into the house. Like this particular shot with Pam, when she walks up, this is like one of the most important shots in the whole movie. But when we are below and following her, it makes her look so small and vulnerable, and the Sawyer family home looks so big and scary, and that it is ready to consume her in ways she does not even know yet. Everywhere is so barren in this movie. A hot summer where there's no shelter from the long, stretching empty roads and fields to the inside of the Sawyer family home, filled with nothing but carnage and a few spare pieces of furniture to hold family dinner. It's desolate, almost apocalyptic in nature, and we know nothing good will come of us being here. I think it's really funny how much the association of gore got with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because there is very little like graphic bloodshed in Texas Chainsaw as a whole, but this became part of one of the video nasties that got banned and scenes cut and stuff. And it's just really funny because Texas Chainsaw really works off of the power of suggestion as a film. Like, to me, the worst death is Kirk. And I want to say Kirk's our first death. I could be wrong. You know, shoot me. I'm Texas Chainsaw's #1 fan and I can't remember. But Kirk gets struck by Bubba, and the way he, like, shakes on the ground, I hate it. It's really reminiscent of, like, when people strike pigs for slaughter, which... that was an original inspiration when writing Texas Chainsaw for Toby, was kind of replacing cattle with people, especially in the setting of Texas. And, you know, this scene is very reminiscent to that. Along with that is, I think, one of the most iconic murders in the Texas Chainsaw movie is Pam's, and this is all suggestion. And you might not believe me. People, like, don't believe this, but it's totally 100% true, is that Pam... Leatherface picks her up to put her onto the meat hook. We see Pam being picked up. We see the hook. It cuts to Pam's face in agony of being put onto the hook. We do not see a hook go through her. We don't even see, like, just the jolt of her on it. None of that is in this movie. But because of how Tobe Hooper had it cut and filmed, your brain puts the pieces together so it looks like you saw her get put on the hook, but she was never put on the hook. Explicitly, because Toby was trying to get an R rating and so be able to put this movie out, and I believe he verbatim asked, like, the MPAA about that. I was like, well, if I don't show the hook going through, like, that's chill, and I think they were like, yeah, that's chill. So this is how we ended up with this shot, but... people genuinely do associate Texas Chainsaw with gore, carnage, and violence, but I'm like, if you watch it, that's, like, very low. This is, like, a psychological horror in a way. And just how Texas Chainsaw thrives on the power suggestion, I think that's one of the most effective aspects of these slashers. It's the air of reality around them. Most taking places in houses, and more importantly, the killer is human. Or at least was human at one point. It's no longer a boogeyman in an isolated castle. It's a random man who's entered your home and is waiting in the shadows for you. And that, in itself, is a very real horror. It brings the idea that this could be you or your friends, and I think that's a big reason horror and slashers, in particular, are very cathartic and enjoyed by women, is because it's separating real-life horror, where you can see it with an air of fiction. This is not real life, but it gets you so close to the true horrors of... is this guy following me down the street? Did I really lock my door when I came home? Or the light post went out, so I have to put the keys in between my fingers. It's a way to get a safe scare that also parallels your reality, which is really trippy to say. But sometimes that horror hits way too close to home, in particular with the 1980 film Maniac. It starts taking us away from the power of suggestion and just full send into the gory bloodbath era of slashers. We follow Frank, a man plagued by his mommy issues, stalking and scalping women in New York to take the hair home for his mannequins in his den of derangement. What I find really interesting about Maniac is we're focusing on the killer in the movie. We have no final girl or group of young teens we're sticking by. We're with Frank, by his side in horror as he brutalizes innocent women. Which most people relate this film to making it just far much more exploitative in that way of we are following this serial killer. But to me, this actually makes these victims far more three-dimensional. These are sometimes women just trying to get on the train to go home. You know, this isn't kids going off into the woods and partying. These are like real women going about life, and we are just sitting in horror, hoping Frank's not gonna do what we know he's gonna do. I think the entire thing surrounding it, too, is way too real for comfort, especially in this slightly after the large serial killer boom, is Frank's an out of shape, mentally unwell, just loser with a penchant for torturing and killing women, which is a real thing. I can find many parallels to the 1960s film Peeping Tom, which is just beyond brutal for the time, and the mother issues we see Frank deal with and the post-mortem delusions surrounding her brings us all the way back to Psycho. But I mean, this film's notoriety is really for its kills, which of course were done by, honestly, the man behind special effects, in particular slasher special effects, Tom Savini. He even got to blow up his own prosthesis head in Maniac, and he is why the movie has its status. Rue Morgue magazine called it, quote, some of the most unprecedented, graphically detailed depictions of violence ever put before a viewing audience, unquote. That same year, we would get some woman equality on screen in the name of a franchise powerhouse being brought out with a female killer, at least in the first one, openly inspired by Mario Bava's of Bay of Blood. Friday the 13th hit the screen, and once again, Tom Savini was out here working his makeup puss out because goddamn can he kill a hoe. If you want to get past Ghostface, you would know that the first killer in Friday the 13th is Mrs. Voorhees, Jason's mom, not Jason himself. Friday the 13th and Camp Crystal Lake would spawn an entire insane franchise of film, taking us all the way to space and even worse, Manhattan in the pursuit of killing people. I don't think they knew what a powerhouse of film they were going to end up making. Even Sean Cunningham, one of the co-creators, has openly mentioned that they were making it to try to ride the cash coattails of John Carpenter's Halloween. But Friday the 13th really feels nothing similar to Halloween. If anything, it really does pay more homage to Giallos, in the sense of we don't know who the killer is, having that reintegrated into the mystery aspect of the plot that we saw in proto slashers, which has an amazing payoff and evolves onto our currently established concept of how a slasher ends, to give us a final scare and leaving it far more open-ended, which, as we know, would branch it off into sequels. The final scene of Friday the 13th is one of the earliest jump scares I can remember. Like, she's on that canoe, we all have this sense of relief, like, oh, great. We did it, team. We're so good. And then Jason comes out of the water and attacks her. Just so phenomenal. As well as the way they killed Kevin Bacon in this movie is so insane and kind of makes it. I think I heard Tom Savini say that the tubing they had to do the fake blood out of his throat actually got clogged. So his assistant just blew through it at the end. And it kind of gives us that like bubbling thing. And it's so nasty, so good. Also, shout out to the Prowler, another kind of unsung hero in the slashers that Tom Savini also did the makeup on, because that man was booked and busy in the 80s. And by the early 80s, we had a bit much more defined layout of what slasher movies were. It may have had some changes, but you really needed a few things. Your mass killer usually had a bladed weapon, we had a strong final girl who didn't drink, party, or get frisky, and a group of friends that did the polar opposite of what the final girl did. And this kind of starts giving us the whole overarching puritanical notion surrounding slasher flicks, as we will be getting into. I think the reason which films still held notoriety with how many were created was because of how inventive they were. Like Sleepaway Camp having the insane twist ending, or a personal all-time favorite of my husband, Fredward Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street, is you had such a simple formula that you had kind of two options. Is you could keep it really simpler, and we had these hundreds of movies of just babysitters getting killed. A dime a dozen, no one cares. But then you could get really inventive with the concept of a possible chomo, which I don't think he is. A possible that going around and killing teens in their sleep where you can't get away from him. Like, slasher formula can really just be as simple as you want, or you can go as off the wall and crazy as you want with it. Either way, people were tuned into these movies, leaving them being entire franchises that have stood the test of time, and for good reason. But just as much as there were people eating up this boom of slasher flicks, because it is estimated there were about 300 slasher films made between 1980 to 1989. That, I think, is, like, I'm not even gonna try to do the math, but, like, it's a lot. There were just as many people denouncing their existence as there were the ones praising it. If you remember, in the extreme horror video, we talked about video nasties. This is the similar time of that, just now we are in the America sense of their censorship surrounding horror film. In particular, film critic Roger Ebert vocally spoke out against slashers and extreme horror films, saying slashers are dangerous films for dangerous minds that would lead to societal decay. Don't say something you don't like that hot if you don't want people to do it. On the show's sneak preview, he and fellow critic Gene Siskel went as far as creating an entire episode dubbed Women in Danger, where they by name came after Savini and others in the genre for showing sadism towards women on film, even within the first few sentences, saying these films hate women. This was kind of the big push surrounds slashers, and it's still a viewpoint some people have, is they're extremely misogynistic and just crave violence against women. And this is where I don't want to lose you at home. I promise I'm gonna keep my misandry in check. I swear to you. I don't think slashers hate women, and I don't think they're misogynistic. I think slashers hate some women. Hear me out. Stay with me, team. Final girl is considered one of the absolutely necessary key parts of a slasher. We as viewers, which in horror, as of now and as before, it is objectively still viewed by a higher percentage of men. And us viewers are led to relating and identifying ourselves to our final girl. She's our protagonist, who more times than not is the one who slays her own would-be killer. She's the strongest character in the film, our candle in the window. There is very few, if any, other genres that put men in the position of having the female character as their sole protagonist and point of self-identity within the film, like slashers.
Halloween does not hate women.
Yeah, you know, when I saw that scene, I must admit I wasn't really worrying about the woman as much as I was placing myself in that closet and thinking about that killer, how I would handle it.
Now, it's our tropes around who is the final girl that starts to show the separation of women deemed worthy and unworthy within their life as a whole on screen. Our final girl doesn't drink. She doesn't do drugs. She isn't sexually active. She doesn't go crazy partying. She's the one that tells everyone she thinks there's something bad around, and she's signed off as crazy. This starts this clear separation on film, and more times than not, when you are watching a slasher, within the first 10 minutes, you can pick out who your final girl is. Girls who do the opposite get killed. They sneak off with their boyfriend. They go to the garage to get beers. It's a perfect example of the Madonna horror complex. Objectively, slashers push a puritanical mindset, a conservative one at times, absolving from sin, or you will meet a brutal death. They hate women with agency. They punish them for committing sin, which is kind of why it's insane to me how many Christian organizations hated slasher movies, because in a way they are promoting their ideals, but I think that's a lot of issues with religious organizations when you actually tell them what their ideals are. Either way, religious groups would boycott and have meetings discussing the dangers of slashers. In particular, Christian groups were very unhappy to hear about films like Silent Night, Deadly Night, where it would take place around Christmas, and in particular this film, a guy dressed as Santa was an ex-murderer coming into the home, but technically it's Santa, not Jesus. I don't know. That's just me. This was far from the only instance of labeling slashers as women-hating films. Along with people in film, feminist groups like NOW were outwardly speaking against them, and some going as far to picket films, which, as we all know, the best PR for horror movies is that it is too brutal, too extreme. People should not be viewing this. It is graphic, it is violent. That's quite literally the best PR could get. In particular, I Spit on Your Grave had a surge of popularity after this Dangerous Women's episode, And I think it was called something else before. I think it was called like Woman or something. And then it got relabeled as I Spit on Your Grave. But they talked about this film and skyrocketed in sales. Bad press is great press when it comes to horror.
Feminists in particular have said that this is a film that promotes harm to women.
But ultimately, this would turn into a censorship and legal battle, as it always does in film. The MPAA, our favorite dudes who, we talked about in the House of a Thousand Corpses video when it comes to censorship on film, in particular horror films, as they totally hate, were kind of forced, from what I've seen, it's a lot of hearsay, but it seems like they were forced to crack down on slasher films, or they're going to start having to be forced to crack down on other films. They were dishing out X ratings at the second a drop too much blood was shown. X movies are essentially a kiss of death for getting put into major theaters and selling any box office tickets. Along with this, rental stores could face legal punishment and possible fines, loss of business license, and even jail time depending on where they were at if they were found to be allowing under 18-year-olds to rent R-rated films. In 1989, a bill would be passed making horror films classified as corn and having to be kept hidden in an off-room with such films in rental spaces. Interestingly enough, one of the main things shown on film they wanted to fall into this new category was cannibalism. I just find that very interesting that you think cannibalism's erotic. They attempted to spread this bill and bring it to the Senate, which fortunately it was deemed as violating the First Amendment, and the bill was overturned in 1992 when slashers were essentially dead at that point by the oversaturation of them. Like I mentioned, there were about 300 slashers made within 9 years. They found success and later demise within the staple blueprint laid out for them. With the same framework and elements repeated time and time again, babysitters, kids in the woods partying, even just the mass killer and final girl started to just bore people how you could go in and know exactly what's going to play out. With the same frameworks and elements repeated time and time again from babysitters, kids in the woods, even the existence of a mass killer and their final girl started to bore horror fans, regarded as uncreative and reliant on a formula that lost its run, becoming undeniably predictable. There were already slasher films mocking slasher films as early as 1982, with my, in particular, favorite, Slumber Party Massacre, which paints a picture in your head immediately, and that's part of why it's called that is, you're thinking of girls scantily clad having a pillow fight, and a killer comes and starts killing them, which is essentially kind of what the film is. The movie is written by feminist activist Rita Mae Brown, and it has a large amount of self-referential in it. Like the one scene in which Valerie is watching a slasher movie on TV while the killer is outside killing one of the boys, and she, doesn't hear anything because she's so focused on the TV. It also shows a focus on the element of most slashers in which the killer is using a penetrative object, which you can use as a relation of an attack of a different kind, which how our killer in Slumber Party Massacre carries an overly long drill that he usually holds waist level, even explicitly saying, quote, "You know you want it, you'll love it," unquote, when threatening our final girl. It's as on the nose as you can get without saying it. I think the funniest way is to throw jabs at stuff that's pretty unserious, the just misogynistic overtone is mockery. And the way Slumber Party Massacre mocks slashers makes it a phenomenal slasher film. And I eat that up. I think it is so funny. And it's a really good movie. And the second one's so campy and insane. I can't even get into it. But on the topic of oversaturation, my favorite example on how oversaturated slasher flicks were being made is the holiday phenomena, we can call it, is there is, at minimum, one slasher movie for every holiday. Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, April Fool's, which I will say in particular, that is a phenomenal slasher film. I think April Fool's Day does not get the credit it gets. That movie is so good, and I think it is, in my opinion, I think it might be a partial inspiration for those Happy Death Day movies. That type vibe, it gives very April Fool's Day to me, but that's just me. But that is the whole thing. If there was a holiday, there's a movie for it, and that is part of how easy it was. There was a blueprint to a slasher film, and then the other aspect is, what's happening in the movie? Pick a holiday. You really could craft one of these movies up. I'm sure you could write one in a month and have it started in production. It was so easy to make these. Once you have a formula, just follow the formula. And I think that's actually kind of why I, in particular, liked Eli Roth's Thanksgiving that came out recently, or I saw it last year. I don't know how recent it is. But I think it's even more fun to pay homage to slashers by kind of playing homage to the like insanity of the horror slashers, because these are where you will find some of the best and worst slasher films, and I stand by that. And it's just a nice little like call to it, because if you're into slashers, like, you know, the holiday thing, like, it's a thing. No one spoke better on what happened to the slasher genre like Wes Craven. As early as New Nightmare 94, we see Wes acknowledge and to a degree mock the elements within the genre that he himself placed a brick within. And thus, we would come to complete fruition with his 1996 film, Scream. Scream hasn't left pop culture since its birth, until he reignited the genre by essentially mocking itself. Because if you can't make fun of yourself, who can you make fun of? Scream is a slasher that reeks of self-awareness and mockery of the genre, crafted by a man who was there for its inception. And it's not mean-spirited. It's almost the reminder of why we love slashers. Like when Randy tells us what you do and don't do to survive. It's what we yell at the TV at home because we know after watching Halloween, you don't run up the stairs. You don't separate from your friends. It pairs the nostalgia with a new air of freshness. Like Sydney as our final girl, who does go to the party. She does run into locked bathrooms, and she does sleep with her boyfriend. And none of this would lead to her demise. She fights tooth and nail, surviving by her own strength, and not on pre-existing puritanical notions of slashers. It's also just so well written. Like, it's so stupid how strong all these characters are and their relationships, and the whole premise of Sydney's mother was mysteriously murdered, and it turns out her boyfriend was the culprit, who we previously in this movie had to rule out absolutely couldn't have been the murderer, but he was the murderer and was doing it vaguely homoerotically with his best friend. Like, Scream is that girl when it comes to slasher movies. It is a love letter to horror. And it's the evolution of horror, using humor to cut tension, amplify drama between relationships of characters, and the rules of the blueprint crafted of slashers, even as we find out in Scream 2. Sydney wasn't the only one to come out alive, marking her as the new generation of not just final girls, but in my particular verbiage, survival girls. This is no longer girls that were just thrown into a damsel of distress scenario where they had to figure it out at the last second and they're crying through the whole thing. These are girls who are fighting tooth and nail for their survival, and they will not die at the hands of some loser in a Halloween mask. Our new wave of what many refer to as neo-slashers honored this humor inclusion, like scenes in Final Destination or I Know What You Did Last Summer. A breath of fresh air came in to replace the repetitiveness and dissatisfaction everyone had felt from slashers, but we did get that really garbage mess of horrible remakes during this time, because there's this weird thing when people discuss horror. It's not weird, I guess, but people will time frame horror by post and pre 9/11. I know that sounds kind of odd to hear with horror, but a lot of people time this in horror because post 9/11, it was really about remakes because people wanted to feel comforted. They wanted the same material. They didn't want new stuff. Which, if you noticed, we're kind of getting a bunch of remakes right now. So that makes you think about the current social climate. But we did see growth in the genre with this new wave of neo-slashers. And as I just referred to, we now have this new wave of three-dimensional survival girls, which in my eyes take us back full circle with Nancy from Nightmare on Elm Street and Laurie from Halloween. Both the girls were far more than just a final girl, like who we saw in Friday the 13th or, Sally in Texas Chainsaw. Like, these were strong, smart, fighting girls. They were to be feared, and they fought back and they killed as well. The shift of no longer being in the wrong place at the wrong time, as we saw previously. Slashers now became highly personal. You more likely knew your killer than not knowing him, which is actually real life when you look at the statistics of murder. You are more likely to know the person that kills you than not. In particular, one of my favorites is Erin in the 2011 film You're Next, in which she's visiting her boyfriend's family when a group of killers starts killing them in their home. Which, unbeknownst to everyone, Erin was raised by a survivalist prepper father who taught her how to get out of this situation so insanely well, and ultimately we find out that is Erin's boyfriend and his brother trying to kill everyone to get an inheritance, including killing Erin in the wake of all this just for some money. And the way Erin survives in this movie is so good. She's so quick on her feet. She's smart. And once again, she was underestimated. They all didn't know this and they thought, it's just some girl. We can just kill her. And she was like, that's crazy. Along with this, the following year was when we got Cabin in the Woods, which this is like post-Scream. This is like the horror movie for people that like horror movies. It is so self-referential that it's so insane, honestly. Like, I can't imagine someone watching this who has never seen like at least 2 horror movies. Group of friends goes out to a cabin in the woods, and they go in the basement, and there's a bunch of artifacts, and, you know, they mess with one of them, and then, like, hillbilly zombies come out, but we're getting these flashes to this, like, corporate government area where they are all betting and watching this because they set up horror movies to appease ancient gods, and depending on what artifact you pick is what, like, horror movie monster you get. Like, there's absolutely a lament configuration box in there, and later we see all the monsters and they break loose and it's chaos ensues. Cabin in the Woods, if you like horror movies, Cabin in the Woods is a movie for people that like horror movies. It's amazing. But getting out of neo slashers, I'm gonna end with what I think is the current most modern standing subgenre of slashers, which we can refer to as cyber slashers. We live in a cyber age, as you're watching me on the internet. So that's going to transfer into our horror films, and in particular into our slashers. And this lends itself greatly to slasher format. Our previous voyeurism through the eyes of our killer is done via computer or phone screen. It exploits our new paranoia of mysterious calls or texts from unknown scary people, which in a way mirrors our OG Black Christmas. With movies in particular, like I will choose to reference to you, The Den. In this film, a girl, Elizabeth, is trying to track down the murderers of a girl she saw killed on a video chat site called The Den. After she herself was hacked via webcam and seemingly being blackmailed with footage of her and her boyfriend. People, including police, are trying to convince her the murder was a hoax, but she isn't buying it. Ultimately, it ends into a spiral of torture and death of everyone around her, and eventually her own, until it's revealed as part of an entire snuff narrative network, and you can pick people for this to happen to off of The Den, because internet horror always gotta be snuff in red rooms, but, you know, it's still a pretty fun movie to watch. Better than those Unfriended movies. God damn, do I hate those films. Like, garbage. Having a group of unknown cyberstalkers and killers effective, it leaves you watching this feeling like there's nothing you could do to stop something like that happening, and the paranoia of who's watching you and isn't, which is really what all slashers aim to do. Right now, with slasher films, we're in this heyday of a kind of really gory resurgence with films like the Terrifier franchise and, When a Killer, what's that one with the guy in the bag stalking? Damn, I'm gonna put it here. I didn't like it that much, but everyone liked it. But we're in this resurgence of really gory slashers, as well as really comedic, kind of campy, not awesome slasher flicks, which all the way takes us back to the 80s with, you know, stuff like Puppet Master. So we're constantly in this, like, self-referencing and going back and going through this entire time cycle, but, you know, we're evolving about people have cell phones in them. Surrounding horror, there's this constant flip-flopping viewpoint of, are they really misogynistic women-hating films, or are they now female empowerment films, or, you know, now we're having a lot of queer films coming out, like the Fear Street franchise and things of that nature. So slashers kind of get this rap for being like misogynistic trash, or, you know, you think they're really empowering. It's a constant flip-flop. Or are they popcorn flicks or just groundbreaking cinema? The slasher stands as kind of an enigma within film, where it'll be violently discredited but then also held on a pedestal at the same time. And that's kind of how all good media is to me. If people aren't hating what you're doing, you're not doing anything good. Either way, the slasher film is always evolving and always around, and I don't think it will ever be going anywhere. And with that, I ask you one question. What's your favorite slasher movie? Let me know down below, and please make sure to check out at least Alice, Sweet Alice, as I mentioned. Genuinely, that movie's so good, and no one ever mentions it. It's so good. So, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Make sure to hit the notification bell. I am Darby Valentine, and once again, thanks for watching. Follow me on all social media platforms at Darby Valentines. They're all listed down below. Members of the channel see videos early, so if you want to see videos early, you can click the link down below. Become a member. They mean the most. And with that, if you like this movie, you'd probably make my video about... I keep calling this a movie. You'd probably make my video about the deep dive into extreme horror. With that, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. God damn it. I'll see ya.